Jordan, did we wake you? Are you okay?
No, I was telling
I
Jen,
noticed you're here on time. Is this a special day? Is it your birthday or something?
Harry.
you know what's funny, Harry, is that I show up late and you give me shit, but then when I come on early, it's just you shuffling back and forth, looking for stuff, missing everything.
How's that
there
strategy going
early.
for you, Jordan? Throwing it back on your boss that it's my fault somehow. I just want to know.
Isn't that our go-to strategy? Like all of us?
Yeah. Hello, Sarah. We've
Hello.
got Sarah Barrett joining us this morning. Jen Chilada Litzkirk.
That is racist, Harry.
I kind of like it.
I kind of like it too. I'm going to get shirts made. I'm sure I'll have a sign show up that Harry's manufactured.
Yes.
Sent to me.
Chilada time.
Jen's
Jen's
Chilada.
Chilada
Awesome.
Time, a new segment on BeerNet Radio.
I really like that. Can you make
Yes.
that for me?
We can make
Jen,
that happen.
that is
Biscuit,
good.
are you done loudly drinking water while we're on air? Are you done? Because I know you wait until we get on the podcast before you start loudly drinking water.
Hey, Harry, why aren't you in the new studio?
I don't have cameras set up yet.
Oh.
I have everything but the electronics. But probably this time next week it'll be done. Anyway, listen. Welcome, folks, to BeerNet Radio, the podcast where all your dreams come true. We're laying down the Wednesday warehouse segment on Thursday to be published Friday. Now, you may be wondering, what kind of outfit are they running over there? It just sounds, what's going on? And you know, you'd be right by asking yourself that question. And let me just tell you that our schedules run with the news. And the news, it's like a river. The news is like a river, and we don't dip our toe in the river. No, sir. We jump headfirst into the river. We're always in the middle of the river. And sometimes that news river, sometimes it flows fast, like over rocks, like it's rapids. And sometimes it just flows gently like the mighty Mississippi. And when it's running fast over rocks, we don't have time with bullshit podcasts. We're out putting the news out, the things that this is what you pay for. And so keeping that in mind, sometimes we have to record Wednesday Warehouse on any day except Wednesday. So that is the explanation. And it's been a little busy this week for all of us. I mean, craziness. And so before we talk about the big whiskey news, Jen, it appears that you were in Chicago this week. You talked to that elusive forest animal who rarely comes out, Jim Sabia.
Yes.
Of Constellation.
The blue blazer clad elusive forest creature.
The blue blazer clad. Yes. And so good note this morning. And and we have more coming, but I wanted to say that what's interesting to me is that, and I think this is true, that Jim kind of downplayed them getting any, jump balls from Bud Light fallout in terms of volume, because, those Bubbas who aren't drinking Bud Light, they're not going to spend that extra buck for, Modelo Especial. It's too much. But for shelf space, holy cow. And he's like fall shelf space. And, who cares? All it does is just set it for the winter. Right. Nobody drinks beer in the winter. Yeah. It's the spring resets. And so it seems like, did they spend a lot of time on that?
Of course. So we were talking, the whole day in Chicago, we were meeting with different people, and all anybody wanted to talk about, of course, was Bud Light. Of course, Jim was talking about Bud Light and, how direct are the recent accelerations in scans for Modelo coming from Bud Light volume. And as you said, it's not directly coming from Bud Light volume at all, but they're getting so much more focus from retailers and distributors. I don't know if we knew that 20% of their volumes overlap with AB products and AB houses. And obviously those guys have to be leaning on Constellation so much more from, Bud Light volumes, down 25%. But then, yeah, at retail too, just like Molson Coors had said, they're getting, what do they get? They've gotten a lot of more features and display activity in the last 8 to 10 weeks. You're not going to put Bud Light on an end cap, right?
Yeah.
But you'll probably put Modelo. Yeah, he did say, you're right. Spring is the big enchilada, to stay with our chilada motif. But he did say, they've had more fall activity than ever, and they are getting shelf space from Surprise Craft and Seltzer, and probably some redundant Bud Light packs. There's still many redundant Bud Light packs out there. Yeah. And they're ready for spring resets. Retailers are giving them really good price points, he said, because before he said some of them were adding a lot more onto the price increases, but now they're getting a little more competitive with it because, they want brands like Modelo to drive traffic. He sounded really good. He sounded like firing on all cylinders. I asked him if he expected Modelo Especial to stay the number one beer, as it, not for the full year. It hasn't been yet, but probably will be by next year for the full year. He was like, oh yeah, this 5, 7, 10 years, I think Modelo Especial is going to be the top brand. Now, of course, this is, his brand. So, but,
Gotta talk your book.
Sure, of course.
But that is God, if you told me that Modelo Especial would be the number one beer this quickly, just a year ago, I would have thought you were nuts.
Right.
Everything has fallen into place for Constellation. They've got the demographic tailwinds. They've got Bud Light scrambling. They've got 20% of volume going into houses that are desperate for revenue. It turns out, they didn't like being in AB houses. Now it's kind of an asset because, it's the only game in town.
Right.
So
the only other thing I'd mention real quick is I think we'll see more, Bill Newlands had talked about price pack architecture on the last call, which is like a soda move. Like if you have $20 in your pocket, we should be able to offer you something. So they're doing smaller, like 7 and 8 ounces of some of the brands and messing with that. So I don't know if you'll see some of those come to market in the spring, but he also kind of hinted they're not done line extending off of the big major brands, but it takes them a long time because they really want to make sure that those extensions are authentic to the core, because you don't want to, whittle the brand equity by being willy-nilly with that. So I think we'll see even more in the spring resets.
Did they talk about their shopper?
They did. And their shopper first shelf, which I was like, oh, that still exists.
Well, it's funny because I remember, I think when they first came out with it, it was kind of based on a person walking into the beer aisle and they're, the first thing they look for is Bud Light. And then they kind of are able to sense where everything else is based on where Bud Light is. Right. And so I'm wondering how that's going to. That's
a great question. I did not.
It's going to progress from here
that deeply. I'm guessing, I don't know this, Jim didn't say this, but I'm guessing they'll anchor it around premium lights instead of just Bud Light, right? But Modelo Especial being number one now, I'm sure they're evolving it. But what he did say that's interesting is I think there's like 13,000 shelf sets that have been done. I don't know if it's year to date or that annualized using shopper first shelf. So I didn't even realize they were still pushing that, but they definitely are. And I would be surprised if that didn't accelerate too.
Definitely.
Do you remember one of y'all was there when somebody was talking about shopper first shelf from the stage somewhere a few years ago? And I don't know if it was somebody from Boston or someone else that started arguing with them over it in the crowd. Do y'all remember that?
Was that at our summit?
I don't think it was maybe it was. I don't remember. But anyway, I was just like, wow.
Other big news story, Molson Coors getting further and further into the spirits world with the acquisition of Blue Run. Sarah, you spoke with Michel Saint-Jean and David Coors and somebody else.
Mike Montgomery. He's one of the Blue Run co-founders, and he's going to be joining the Core Spirits team. Okay. As their new VP.
Okay. And so I, even though it's my job to know everything that goes on in the beverage alcohol world, was not aware of this Blue Run. Can you tell us, for our listeners that maybe who are as ignorant as I am, what's the story there on Blue Run?
I mean, you're not. It's not like you're super behind the game. They only launched in 2020, which is obviously a difficult time. It was late 2020, like October.
And they got an $85 million payday already. God dang it! I love seeing short kings get rich. And I'm just kidding. I don't know if they're short, but it would be nice if they were short, because you want to see people win. Okay, let's just.
Oh my God.
Let's cut that.
We'll see.
Yeah. I mean, they built up really quickly. They did a really good job getting like financing through to get their whiskey supply. They have like a new distillery that they just started constructing in Georgetown, Kentucky. And Molson is like, they said they're committed to finishing that out, which I imagine was a pretty key part to their deal. And it kind of sounds like they might use that distillery to push or like at least highlight some of these other core spirits products, which would make a lot of sense. And it kind of gives them a home. And since they're just starting to build it, this is purely conjecture, but I imagine that they can put more say into it, and highlight easier if they had, go to somewhere else where they've already built out their distillery, they've got their set tasting room, they've got, their footprint all set up, then they couldn't put their own spin on it as well. But here they're kind of given a blank slate a little bit on that front. So I imagine that's a big get. And then the biggest thing too is that Jim Rutledge, he's pretty well-known master distiller, and he's their consultant and like liquid advisor, which is a great title.
Yeah.
And so they have him on board, and Shaylin Gammon is also kind of like an up and coming like whiskey director, master distiller. And so they're involved too. And I think that was also probably like had to go into Molson Coors' decision on that, because they're kind of powerhouses.
I found it not funny is the wrong word, but it's surprising to me how many of these deals get started just by two people at a conference having a drink. They happen to be seated together at a table. I mean, it's a huge plug for the Beer, Wine, and Spirits Summit. I mean, it's where deals get done. I mean, we've had that tagline before because it's freaking true. It's where deals get done. And like, David Coors was like, yeah, I just met this guy. I was sitting next to him and we kind of struck it up. It's like.
Which makes sense when you're like adding somebody to your company, because part of it is you want them to think similarly to you, right? Bringing something else to the table, but also on like have a similar vision moving forward. So, I mean, and the best way to do that is just like shooting the shit at a whiskey bar.
Wow. Yeah. I also find it interesting that AB and Molson Coors have the exact opposite strategies at the moment, where AB is saying, we are going to focus on our big, giant brands. We're getting rid of any distractions. We're selling it all off. Even Shock Top, the brand we created, we're selling it. And Molson Coors is like, we want to diversify. We want to get more into little shit, and we want to, grow at the margin. And they're two different philosophies. And I guarantee you that we'll be sitting here 10 years from now, if I'm still alive, and Molson Coors will be selling shit and AB will be buying shit. And because everything's a cycle. It's a circle of life.
I don't know that AB is getting out of craft. I mean, they still have a significant amount of craft, like 2 million barrels worth still, right? I think they just got rid of the stuff that they didn't need anymore. They did some spring cleaning, and Tilray was the younger brother that took the hand-me-downs because they think they could do something better with it, right?
I mean, is that a good strategy, Jen, for Tilray? I mean,
I don't know about for Tilray. I think obviously AB has some focus to do, but also when you have Kona, which they didn't have 2 years ago, and Kona is this transcendent brand, right? Get rid of some of the stuff you don't need. I mean, obviously the whole industry has decided the big brewers don't really need to be in craft anymore. It doesn't have the shine that it did, right? They still have some brew pubs for watching the market, but you don't need to be this invested in craft. The Molson Coors thing is interesting to me because, I mean, all this is bolt on, right? They have no whiskey business. I mean, they have a small one, but it's not very old. So there's no synergies there. They're going to piss off some of their distributors because it's not going through their beer wholesalers. At this point, I don't even know if their beer wholesalers want it. Some of them probably will. But it's interesting, Sarah, that you said about the facility, because that kind of makes sense. Then they can have a facility in the motherland of bourbon and grow it from there. And in some ways, I think bourbon whiskey is the next craft. It has a lot of the same attributes, like the exclusivity, it's premium. There's a craft beer bourbon continuum, if you will. You have to make beer to make bourbon, right? So
exactly. That's why we call this beer net.
David's reasoning there. He's like, well, he was like, to keep it like really rudimentary, you start with beer to make whiskey. He's like, so we had half of it. Like,
you start with beer to make everything, including water.
And babies.
Yeah. I mean, the human race dependent on beer.
Well, we've talked about MC filling its oats right now. And I think this acquisition goes to show that, because it's something like they're purchasing something where it's not necessarily, hey, we can leverage our beer distribution network. I don't think their beer distribution network really factored into this at all. And I think what will be interesting is that Blue Run kind of has a mixed bag, right, Sarah, of distributors in their 31 states. And so it seems like Molson Coors is going to stick to spirits with these high-end spirits. And if they'll actually pick a formal distribution partner for their spirits biz,
I'm sure Breakthrough will be part of it, right?
Yeah, so they did say like, they can use Blue Run as like just to learn more about the whiskey business, in general, like what they've been doing and how their distribution, factors into that, and how their distributors are performing, and they can kind of look and see what's going on there. So it's kind of a good way to, you're almost testing out, quote unquote, like all of these wine and spirits distributors without having to choose them initially. So they're like, if they
it's already done.
Change it over, they can.
Yeah,
it's already done. They already have relationships with most of those guys, RNDC, Breakthrough especially, and they are going to get some lessons. They're going to get some lessons in issuing credit. That's one thing. They're not used to that. Wait, we don't get our money in 10 days like we do with the beer guys? What's going on here? This is the dance of public companies in the beverage space. I call it category chasing, or segment chasing. It's probably more accurate, where, 10 years ago, it was all craft beer. That was the segment that was on fire. Everybody was talking about. So they all kind of plowed into it because it helps their stock price, and then when the bloom comes off the rose, they find the next thing, and, it's whiskey. So that's where they're chasing. And then also, energy drinks, I think, is a hot category. And if we're talking about all beverages, we're going to see more of this blurring of the lines. It's called blurring of the lines. That's the
blurring of the lions.
Yes, Jen, blurring of the lions.
Dance of the elephants, blurring of the lions.
Yes, blurring. Yes, dance of the elephants, blurring of the lions. And of course, we know that cheetahs never prosper. All right. And so Tilray buying all these brands. Jordan figured it out. Jordan, he's always putting paper to pencil instead of pencil to paper. It's so irritating. He takes his pen, he just puts it right here, and then he puts the paper and writes out the numbers, moving the paper. It's crazy.
I like a challenge. Yeah.
You do like a challenge. And he came out to like $175 a barrel, which is free. That's the price of a barrel at retail. They basically just paid for the inventory. They paid for the retail price of 1 year's worth of inventory. So,
you know what's funny, Harry, is in our conversation, I missed it at first, but it seemed like he implied that what they were buying with these 8 brands was $175 million business. And they got it for basically half that. So, they paid $85 million. So basically they got 50% off on 8 brands.
Yeah.
I think that was something maybe he shouldn't have said, but
what?
The best quotes.
I mean, Irvin is off the cuff.
Erwin.
Erwin. God
Are
dang it.
your German accent coming out?
Well, it's Erwin. Yes, he's off the cuff.
Retarded.
It's retarded. You can't say that.
That's in German. Nobody
offensive.
knows what that means.
Oh, okay. Can't guess it. Jen is referencing a story. I won't tell it, but I was in Germany and I was called that by a German who thought I wouldn't understand what he was saying. He called me retarded, and I'm not fluent in German, just to put that out there, but I was picking up what the guy was laying down. All right. So we've got Tilray getting brands for free, and really all that guy has to do is just flatten the curve. Just like Fauci says, just flatten the curve. Just, get to flat, and that will be a successful deal, is what kind of I'm getting from that, which I think is, doable, even if you have to do it by expanding distribution of the various brands into each other's markets. You know what I mean? And, having Montauk brewed in the West Coast, and he'll save a bunch of money just by geographic brewing, and then also selling Montauk in the West Coast, and vice versa. So that's the other thing. And then AB, the benefit to them is they can focus on what's working, which is Kona, as you pointed out, Jen. And so Andy is still at AB, Andy Thomas.
So yeah, he still has the whole high end, which includes brands like Stella, obviously Kona, which is his baby.
Yeah.
And whether he wants to stay is another thing, but he still has quite a business to take care of over there.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't mean to impugn, but because he does still have a huge business, and he's probably glad to get rid of kind of the dead weight.
That's what I was going to say is I think it's a good deal for both, because really I think what Erwin was trying to get and how he laid it out was, here's these missing pieces I have. I don't have anything in the Pacific Northwest. This Breckenridge distillery I have bothers me because I don't have Breckenridge Brewery. And then I want extra production for Montauk. And so AB said, okay, well, fix all that for you with these brands. And then here, slide in Shock Top and our recently discontinued Highball Energy.
Yeah, I don't why is he buying Highball when it's been discontinued? But
I think that was, you gotta, we're giving you a good deal, but then you got to load all this other stuff on top of it.
I asked him if they offered him Bud Light, and he laughed, but he looked really nervous about that question. He did not. He's like, no, they didn't offer. And then I was like, would you take it if they did? No, I'm just kidding. I didn't ask that.
Oh,
but,
you should have.
I know.
Right. I'll take Bud Light.
So, with the talk of all this kind of everybody transacting with each other to get their, get their thing on, Constellation, if we're going to talk about dead weight over there, you got to talk about their wine business and maybe some of their spirits. Do you anticipate Constellation's already kind of sold off some of it, but are they going to continue on with that side of the business?
I imagine there's going to be a bit more trimming around. But the thing, I feel like if they wanted to sell though, it would be so much still because the volume, that's still there. And I don't know if anybody would want it or could afford it. So, but that's just not to say they don't have anything not doing well. Kim Crawford still Naomi Prisoner, doing well. And then they continue to make, though, I guess this might show their strategy a little bit more. They continue to make the investments in these small premium wine and spirits companies. I feel like it's pretty clear that it's not meant to be as big as their beer business. I think that's obvious.
Isn't that amazing? Constellation started as, they were always the largest premium wine company in the world. And now it's just like an asterisk on their quarterly returns because beer has got, they're the new AB. They're just the big kahuna in the United States with beer. It's just, God, what an amazing deal they got when the DOJ stepped in. on that Modelo deal. That was it's just like, the Sands brothers are the luckiest son of bitches in this side of the Pecos River, if you want to be colloquial about it, which I do.
And
so
they've just nurtured it so well, and they've made a lot of mistakes along the way and other sides of the business. Well, and including their beer business. Yeah. But Jen and I were talking, it's just like they're bulletproof. I mean, you can buy something for $1 billion and sell it for 100 million and never skip a beat.
Just move on down the road. Cases hide many sins. It's an old saying I learned from.
I wonder if Irwin will call them up on their spirits biz.
Yeah.
I mean, everything you were just saying, Sarah, it sounded like too much volume, might be a little expensive. They're not selling that well. Sounds like a deal he just
Simon Irwin.
Their spirits are still just so small.
Yeah.
It's like High West, Casa Noble, like
it is growing.
They have Mi Campo, right? Do they have Mi Campo?
Yeah, Mi Campo as well.
Yeah. Listen, Mi Campo, you Campo is what I always say. I say it every day when I wake up, right, Biscuit? Yeah. Biscuit, Mi Campo, you Campo.
In terms of like not screwing up the Mexican imports business that they have and nurturing it, I think beer could take a page, obviously, some of the most iconic beer campaigns. But the point that Jim made when we were talking marketing a bit is that, look, they don't change their campaigns. Look at AB. Bud Light every other year had a different campaign. The Find Your Beach has evolved a little into La Vida Más Fina, but it's got all the same cues. It's the same essential campaign. Same with the Fighting Spirit for Modelo. Like, they haven't changed it. And so many brewers just change with the wind. And Molson Coors is starting to catch on to this with Made to Chill. They're not changing that, right? They're keeping it.
Yeah, that's a great point, because in Modelo, I mean, they even changed ad agencies, and the marketing didn't change that much. I mean, it evolves. Jim has always talked about evolving campaigns, but not scrapping them. And part of that is longevity. Jim Sabia's been at Constellation for, 15 years in the same role. I mean, they keep people there for a long time. They either retire or die. And, that's not the same with other big companies. And then also, when you change agencies, usually the new agency wants to make their mark, right? They want to hike the proverbial dog leg and pee on everything and make it theirs. And, Constellation has been constant in saying, no, this works. We just need some tweaks. We need some fresh blood, new eyes, and let's move on down the road. Great points. And Jim Sabia, you can't deny the guy has magic in his fingertips. He wasn't a part of the Canopy deal. Let's put it that way. And, I think Constellation has, whether they wanted to or not, solved that issue of chasing after windmills like a modern day Cervantes by bringing on an activist investor, not bringing them on, who, accepting an activist investor on semi good amicable terms for like a year, which could turn sour at any time. So they know that they can't go on these capers anymore that are going to lose $1 billion and just write it off. So these are changing times. We've got people buttoning down their hatches like AB and Constellation, and you've got people opening their hatches like Molson Coors and Tilray. Who's right? Who's wrong? Guess what? We've got 3 publications here daily: Beer Business Daily, Craft Business Daily, and Wine and Spirits Daily, that will be monitoring this, and we will let you know the winners and the losers going down the road. And there will be winners and losers. And with that, I think we've laid down an excellent Wednesday warehouse. Is there anything else that happened this week that I am missing? My nostrils always flare when people buy and sell brands, because I'm sniffing out the news.
You You look just like Ryan Gosling when you do that. You should do that more
Oh,
often.
thanks.
Sarah's like,
you
"What?
know,
No.
do you guys remember when Ryan Gosling's people reached out to us because they wanted to start a non-alc beer, and I talked them out of it.
Oh, you
I was
did?
like, this is way before Athletic, and I was like, oh, that's a terrible idea.
That is so
And then-
funny.
And then they should. Why are people asking me for advice? Jeez.
Well, what's funny? Obviously, Blake Lively had that Betty Buzz, a
Mhm.
non-alc thing, and she doesn't drink. And now they're getting into spirits RTDs, her brand. I'm like,
Yeah,
how does this make any sense? She doesn't.
I
really
don't have a
drink.
problem with that. I don't care
Yeah.
if they actually.
She
drink or
serves
not.
it. She serves it to her many friends.
Well, yes, yeah.
They
Well, I
said
mean,
the same
so at
thing.
least she actually mentioned that she doesn't drink in it.
Yeah.
Like,
She's
Jayla was
not a
like, "No,
pretender.
yeah, I drink," and you're like,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
"No, you
Watch
fucking
me.
don't." Yeah.
Cut.
Spitting it out in plants.
Why are there so many plants in your commercials?
Speaking of plants, in the new studio, this is the worst of all worlds, because instead of just going all fake plants or all real plants, they're half and half, and it's kind of hard to tell which one. So
Oh.
we'll be watering the fake plants, and the real plants are going to die.
That is really
So,
funny. I
and-
like
yeah.
that. I like
And
that.
Jordan had to ask. He's like, "Is this real or not?" I'm like, "Jordan, stick your finger in the pot, feel for the soil." It's like, it's like teaching a child.
Yeah, you got to taste them all so that
You got to taste them all. If you don't lick the cactus, Jordan. I had to tell him that. God. All right, enough of this. Jordan, I'm teasing you. Just for the record, Jordan did not lick any cactuses. No cactuses were harmed in the making of this podcast. All right, guys. Well, listen. I'll have this up later, and thanks for being on. And we'll chat at you later for the Wednesday Warehouse. Adios.
Cheers.